Okay, so first possible error is the errors of the coverage, which means the counting some people more than once because of the some people was counted in the county A, and eventually next day he moved to the another county and counted again. So if the one person is counted more than once, that's a duplication, which means the generated errors of the coverage. And missing some people in this reducing the missing information. And there are the limitations always because we cannot be perfect in the physical and coverages of the population data. So which group of individuals are more likely to be overlooked in the census data collection? Maybe people in living. So people living in the very static on the basis who are the homeowners or others, we may have the better information on their registration and the purchases and the properties. However, some maybe the homeless people and some of the very diverse people, and also those who are living as a rent on the renters, they are the very more likely to be duplicated in the data collection because of the mobile on the information of the residencies. And errors of the contents will be the misreporting information intentionally or unintentionally, but intentional. So there are some types of the intentional errors of the data collection. What we say the age heaping, which means reporting on their age intentionally. They're reporting their age inaccurately, not the correct way intentionally, but usually they report their age younger. I don't know why. Well, we may understand that. The usually younger, reporting their age younger than that because they want to be seen younger, maybe, compared with them being seen older. I don't know exactly. I can understand that 100% of their mind or their backgrounds, but the age heaping means the intentional misreport of their age to the census data. And there are so many errors. Even though there are the fewer errors in the biological on the biological sexes, but there will be many other types of the errors. And the estimating errors. The Census Bureau cannot fix the errors individual record in the most cases. So like error A and error C, based on the erroneous contents in the individuals, Census Bureau may not be able to collect and calculate the very, very good quality of the calculations of the data because the original contents are wrong. So they usually use the re-enumeration, many of the adjustment of the methods, but this is not always very perfect. However, the most developed countries like the United States, we have the most sophisticated ways of the data collection. So the errors of the Census Bureau data will be the minimum level. So the least level in the world. And again, the budget. So based on the budget, these are very, very huge. So you can see that many of the hundred millions of the dollars. So with the better technology, in 2020, we had a lower budget in the census data collection, but it would be very, very expensive. So that's why many of the countries, developing countries or underdeveloped countries, they may not be afford to this amount of the budget. So that's why they do not have the very good quality of the census data relatively. I'm not saying these are very bad quality, but in terms of the possible errors we could see, and they would have the better chance of having those types of errors. So the geographical elements of the census, again, I'm sorry to make the very dry lecture, but these are the very important elements of the census data collection. The largest one is on the national level, the United States and the country, but next level is the regions. So there are the 4 regions in the United States as Northeast and the Midwest and Southwest. Yes, yeah, what we say, where are you from? And I'm from the Pennsylvania, for example. Oh yeah, I actually came from Southern Pennsylvania because I worked at the Gettysburg College in my previous institution. So I would say I came from the East Coast or Northeast because the Pennsylvania is considered as the East. And it's not very super Northeast or very, very North, but it's considered as the East. And Midwest and the South and West, and we can see there are the distributions of the states in those 4 regions. And each region, there are the 3 to 9 divisions, and there are the states, territories of natural division, the regions, and the counties, the subunits of the divisions in the states. So there are the very large type, many types of the divisions in the geographical information in the census. And there are the subunits of the counties of the countries designed by the Census Bureau, which is a census tract consists of the 4,000 people or 4,000 individuals living in that area, and the blocks of the block group subunits of the census tracts. So in this in this graph, you can see that the census block would be the very lowest level of the unit, and the block group census tract, 4,000 people, counties or the municipalities and cities and the states, divisions and the regions and the nations. These are the hierarchy of the census tract and the census data. And the Northeast, I said the Pennsylvania. I came from Pennsylvania and considered the Mid-East. And Arkansas is considered the South. All right. The West and the Midwest, we can see the divisions and the divisions of the regions we can see. So New England and the Middle Atlantic, these are some divisions, and in the South Atlantic, the East, South Central, and West, South Central, and these are the divisions of the United States. So we are in the South as a region, and the West, South Central as the divisions, and the Arkansas is the state. If we're living in Jonesboro, Jonesboro would be one of the city and the counties. So they're living in the Adams County, for example, some of the counties. So there are very, very details of the tracts, the geographic information we can see in the census data. So in a long time ago, so these days, the surveyors and the people, data collection individuals, they can come. Maybe they can knock the door and they can even call before they would come. But a long time ago, in the wildlife and the some other type of time, the census data collection was associated with a very high risk of the injury of the people, because they were the total stranger. They would not know about the time and the purpose of the census data collection. So this is the picture we would imagine on the scene of the data collection of the people. All right. Oh my gosh, misclicked that. So other than that, okay, okay, sorry about that. So, only small portion of the world, so including the United States and many of the very highly developed countries, they would collect the information of the birth certificates and the death certificates. But many of other countries, again, because of the budget and the system of the social infrastructure, they would not have very good ways of the data collection. So again, the historical demography and the history of demography. Compared with the previous contents, let me go forward very quickly, because these are very pure list of the information. So the historical demography means the very the keeping track of the history and the origins of the census data. For example, the demographic transition. This is the trends of the population growth and the changes. But before that, before knowing and before learning about the population transition, they wanted to investigate which were the origins of the data set. So SA of the principal population, and there were very, very long, very, very old one, even published in the 1662. Wow, that's about 300, more than 400 years old, 500 years old, like that. So before that, a very long time ago, the people started to collect the census data. So based on these readings, these are not included in our reading, but based on those readings, the historical demography says that the registration of the data set of the Christianity or the Christian churches, and they manage the data because of the purpose of the registration of the marriages, for the baptism and the burial as the ceremonies, very important ceremonies of the community. But other than that, in archaeology, there are some of the records of the data set. I'm not sure we can say these are the census data. So, but anyway, the population data on these were collected in the ancient time. Alright, so cycles of the population, let me move very before, but again, the population changes, and these are also very important topic because the trend of the population changes. These are very closely relevant with the power of the country. So long time ago, the overpopulation and the very high fertility was a very big concern because they worried a lot about the extinction of the humankind because of the limited amount of the resources. I mean not the human resources, but the natural resources. So, for example, in the world, the 5.0, which means most of the women, so average woman, they had 5 births, 5 births per their life. So can you imagine the woman or in your family, your spouse or you yourself would have the 5 babies in your lifespan? That would be very, very big in the contemporary United States in general. But in these days in the world, this is about the 2.5 births per woman. However, in Germany, about 1.6. And China 1.8, India 2.2. These are very, very lower than that. However, still in Angola, still there are 5.3 of the babies per woman. So the high fertility there was considered as a very big source of the overpopulation because there are more people. If there are more new people, as we discussed in the natural increase of the population, this will be a very big source of the natural increase of the population. So anyway, many of the scholars, they wanted to manage this fertility rate, and they investigated a theory that the demographic trend theory, which means based on the changes, the high rate of the fertility, that would be changed as the low level of the fertility. So we will have more chance to describe that, learn about the demographic transition in more details. So I will pass it very quickly. But the transitions of the fertility and the mortality, these will be very big sources of the shift of the demographic transition. So we will care more about that in the population growth section. So based on your opinion, you may think that the current population is too large or too small, but the distribution is also very big matters. So there are very limited sources of the data, but still very, very useful. So in the European countries, the Constitution of the United States and the Bureau de General de Statistique, and in the France and the National Census in the Great Britain. So many of the European countries, and so now we see these are many of the developed countries in the world now, and they had very big origins, very old and very, very long origin of the population changes. So there are the methods, many methods, the history of demography, but these are not very, very the concentration of the courses. So let me move very quickly about that. So the stopping and the spacing, a nuclear family is a very big and very representative format of the family, but that was also a very representative format of the family because of the high mortality, which means the older generation, they would pass away very quickly compared with these days. So eventually, based on the natural selection, there was only a very middle-aged people as a general trend of the population. So, sorry. Other than that, so many of the things, so because of the humankind, because of the very high levels of the pollution and many of the natural disasters, for example, we would see that the humankind will not be on the globe or the earth anymore because of the high levels of the natural disasters and the changes of the temperature or even the war situations. So natural catastrophes and the man-made disasters, there are many of the scenarios we can see that. And one scenario is the demographic suicide, which means that many of the countries would have very low, very low fertility rate, which means lower than the replacement level. For example, let's assume that, so this is not the only one way of the family formation, but if there is one adult, I mean, there are some the heterosexual couple and they meet together and they have the baby within that family, for example, within very limited assumption. And if they have 2 children in that family, it's around the replacement level because 2 adults met to form a family and they generated 2 children. So the 2 adults, they will pass away, or they will die later, but as they generated, and they made 2 the live births as a new citizens of the world. Then they replaced their number of the counts. So this is the definition of the replacement level. But because of the death rate, so there are some immature deaths, and there are the young generation who they die for some reasons. So usually the TFR, the total fertility rate over 2 point something, 2.1 or 2.2, these are considered as the replacement level. However, some countries would have the lower than, so TFR, the total fertility rates are the lower than 2, which means these are lower than the replacement level, which means there will be the decreasing levels of the population. So the discussion question would be how the countries may increase the fertility rate will be very important topic of the many of the countries. So in the pre-modern history of the countries, there had the differences in mortality for the well-fed elites and those are in the poor. In these days, even though there are many of the differentiation of the health conditions, but still the lower levels of the differences. So some of the countries and Ukraine a long time ago, and China and many of the countries, they had the famine the information. So, and also many of the war situation and the COVID-19 we experienced relatively just 3 years ago. These were some factors of the changes. However, if there were the hits of the increase of the population, there would be the downturn of the population. Or in terms of the COVID-19, many people died. Many people were killed because of the COVID-19. But after the COVID-19, there would be some of the rebound of adjustments because if the economic situation gets better, for example, and if we have the lower levels of the unemployment rate and the increase of the income, there would be high chances of the increased chance of the increased levels of the fertility based on the situation. So we are not sure about the changes after the COVID-19, but we can observe those changes. So again, these are some of the scenarios we can see, but we can check more details later. So the migration and the selection and the fitness we will cover in the chapter of the migration of the population. But usually the selection, especially the international migration, and these are very closely related to the selection process because they have highly qualified people. They are more likely to be coming to the more developed country like the United States. So what kind of demographic population studies? So the population composition matters, as I said a long time ago, the growing concern of the population, the Malthus, which is the father of the modern population theory, and the racial composition, gender, economic equality, and residential segregation, rising income inequality, and return of the college education. These are some facts we know as the common sense, but we can see that those types of the statistical facts were conducted by the population, the demographers who study population. So many of the studies and many of the statistics we know as the common sense, these are generated by the population studies we can see. Alright, so this is the very brief history of the population and the population data, and we will cover more details in of the chapters as the population increase and the structure of the population, the age structure and the gender structure of the population in the next week. Alright, so again, the lecture slides will be posted very shortly, and weekly quizzes also will be posted at on the Friday night. So you will have Friday night and Saturday and Sunday to study the weekly quiz, and anytime on every week, the Sunday of that week will be the due of the weekly quiz of that week. So I will post more detailed information in the Canvas website, but please let me know if you have any questions about the lecture contents and the quizzes. Alright, thank you very much and have a great weekend, and see you next week.